somebody on our show once said, it's probably unlikely there ever will be one. It is too complicated. There's too many issues to be solved that it's very unlikely, but it's certainly in our lifetime.
I'm a bit more of an optimist than that. I think it's not without risk. People sort of describe it as the moon landing of our generation. Like it's that. I mean, these systems are so complicated. It's that type of big deal, right? I mean, when we landed a person on the moon, it took a huge engineering feat to get them there and return them safely. Building a quantum computer requires the same level of like engineering, probably the same amount of money as it required to put a man on the moon. But at the same time, like if you could build a quantum computer like that, then you could just do some tremendous things that just aren't even possible today. Like you could find cures to cancer, you could break encryption. I mean,
that's not a good thing.
Well, okay, yeah, but
I think there's this. It's a bit like with Bitcoin, right? We talk about Bitcoin, censorship-resistant money. It's freedom money. Yeah, every time somebody talks about a criminal or a terrorist using Bitcoin, we talk about an activist or somebody living under authoritarian regime has the benefits from it. So there's this scenario where you can see the good side and the bad side. I think the breaking of encryption is basically bad because people need privacy. But I think the curing of cancer is obviously good.
Yeah,
but that's quite a bold statement to say. Having a quantum computer could cure cancer. Is it because the volume of research it can do? Is it? Why is that?
So what? I guess maybe it's a bit too far of a step to.
Yeah, but you've got to stand by that now.
You're going to hold me to where's my cure to cancer in 10 years' time?
Hitchin scientist solves cancer, cures cancer with machine.
I guess what I mean is that when you get into the depths of sort of like trying to design a new drug, so if you're trying to design a new cure for cancer, and by the way, I don't do this. Like day job's busy enough as it is trying to build a quantum computer yet. People tell us you're trying to design a new drug. That's quite a complicated thing. It's probably quite a big molecule. It's working inside of your body. It's probably, it's quite complicated to work out what's going on there. So the way that we get around that at the moment is we just sort of do a reasonable job of working out what it'll do on a computer, and then you basically feed it to a human. So you sort of, you do a lot of trial and error in clinical trials by, actually trying out drugs and seeing how they work and things like that. That makes it quite hard for us to work out, are there new molecules, are there new drugs out there that we haven't even begun to explore because they're so different from everything else out there that we just would never have thought it, and we certainly wouldn't have been confident enough to give it to a human. So, and that all stems to the fact that it's very hard to model big molecules, big systems using existing computers. But quantum computers are much better at doing that. So the reason why you find it hard to model a big molecule is it's
lots of variables.
It's a really quantum mechanical system. Like if you've done chemistry, if anyone cares, there's lots of interactions between molecules. It's all quantum stuff. So a quantum computer sort of is much better at modeling all of those many variables, all of those quantum effects. So you can imagine a day where you can design a drug from start to finish just inside a computer. And then you can therefore hit a button, you can say, okay, this last drug did this one thing. Let's just explore, just using a computer, how a drug will work and what types of things it might do. And so obviously then the leap to curing cancer is a bit of a big one, but then, if you've got that type of ability to just work out, like design drugs from scratch to be solving certain problems, it just enhances sort of drug discovery, just no end, and sort of all the rest of it. And so, no one's identified a cure for cancer that you would be able to solve if you had a quantum computer, but you can still imagine if you had that type of power, you'd be able to do that type of like really impressive calculation.
How much synergy is there between the world of AI development and quantum computing? And is it something that will eventually come together as kind of like a combined science?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of jury's out at the moment. I mean, people are really interested in that. When I mentioned about quantum computing having lots of near-term applications, mostly what people talk about is applying quantum systems to machine learning and artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of active research at the moment. It will take one breakthrough to finally find the computing system that can be applied to machine learning, but it's quite easy to compare like a quantum computer. It's quite easy to imagine it being used for machine learning.
Right.
Even though no one's had that big leap to show that a quantum system could provide speed up. So the whole field is sort of wrapped up in this quest, if you like, to sort of show that a quantum system is better than what's already out there, like a classical NVIDIA GPU or something like that.
Okay.
No one actually shown that speed up yet, but there's a lot of potential for it.
And in the world of these massive super quantum computers, like I've seen the big cylinders, like the tubes coming off. They look like something. They look like something out of like the 40s or something. It's like weird, like. But in that world, and like I said, I'm very aware of the Chinese one because I think everyone wants to know what they're up to because they're probably very secretive. Here we go.
Yeah, I call it the golden chandelier.
They're actually quite beautiful, really. What is going on here? Can you explain this image to us?
Yeah, so I will say that the only quantum bit, this is all just one big fridge. So a lot of quantum computers rely on being super low temperatures, so close to what's called absolute zero, the lowest temperature you can go.
Because
that basically isolates your quantum thing from everything else in the world. So what you want is your qubits.
Your quantum thing.
Yeah, what you want, your qubits cannot interact with anything. You cannot interact with anything. They have to be perfectly isolated to like preserve. They can't be measured. So basically the reason why it needs to be super cooled is because if it interacts with anything, a room temperature or anything else like that, that basically ruins the quantum state. It acts as a measurement, which sort of just destroys everything. So all this stuff needs to be cooled down to super low temperatures. So actually most of what you see here is just one big fridge. And the only quantum bit, the part of the system which is quantum, right at the bottom of the picture, you can sort of see there's a little square. There's a little red bit there. That is your quantum chip. That is the thing doing the quantum mechanical processing. That's the bit that contains your qubits.
Well, if you're spending tens of millions, I think they've rightly designed the rest of it to look interesting because only you and a few of your friends will know that. If they just showed you that little box, people are like, well, that's not fucking cool.
Yeah. And all the rest of it is feeding all of the information down into the so all of the sort of vertical little coils you can see and all the cool little things.
Yeah.
That's just basically your wiring, feeding all the information down into your quantum bit just down at the bottom.
That is a very cool design. So anyone listening who's not seen the video, just go onto Google and search for a quantum computer and have a look at these machines. So do we know whose machine is it, or do they all look like this?
So the title is First Quantum Computer to Pack 100 Qubits Enters Crowded Race. So that could be, so there are a few, IBM, Google, some of the big guys. There's a company called Rigetti that's a startup. Those are the companies that have reached this 100 qubit type point.
Danny, can you search up China quantum computer? Because there's another one I've seen.
Cool. So this is what our system looks like. So these are systems that use light. So now all of a sudden you can't see that fridge system. You can't see that golden.
Remind us what they use instead.
So they use photonics. They use light to do similar to what we do.
But you said before there's another option. You could use something else instead of photons.
So you can use electrons.
Okay.
So the previous systems that we saw, basically there's loads of different ways to try and do the same thing. You can either rely on super cooled sort of electronic circuits, like at really, really low temperatures, which is the picture we saw before. That's what Google and IBM and those types of companies are doing. This system relies on using light, and so that's what this looks like. That's what our system looks like on the inside. Sort of the reason why it doesn't rely on super low temperatures is that light, it sort of doesn't really interact with anything in the same way that electronics do. Like you can pass a laser beam, across a room, and it doesn't interact with anything. So it doesn't need to be cooled down like that. It just it can work at room temperature.
So these are no one's trying to solve the 1,000, 10,000, 1 billion qubit thing right now. Is it step changes?
I think there are a few companies looking at, so there's a combination. There are a few companies looking at how do we get from 100 qubits to 200 qubits to 300.
Right.
I think most companies also have an activity to look at how you get from 100 qubits to 10,000 qubits to 1 million qubits. You've got to sort of work out both at the same time almost. So you sort of got to have a bit of a short-term product roadmap and then a longer-term one.
what kind of qubit level does it get to the point where it starts to solve like crazy problems that could never have been touched before?
So some quantum computers are starting to do that already.
Okay.
So there've been 3 demonstrations of what's called quantum supremacy, which is where a quantum computer does something that a normal supercomputer can't do. There've been 3 so far, 2 by, in fact 4 actually, 2 by the Chinese, 1 by a company called Xanadu in Canada, and 1 by Google. So these are all they've built a quantum computer that's big enough that all of a sudden it can do something that a normal computer can't do. The sort of weird thing is that the problem is that those problems at the moment aren't useful problems. They're not like machine learning. They're sort of weird mathematical, and so you sort of got to imagine that a lot of this is being driven like a bunch of mathematicians. They've come up with a problem that's sort of very specific that a quantum computer can do very, very quickly that a normal computer can't do. The problem at the moment is that no one cares about that problem. It doesn't.
Right.
It's not useful, but it's still a stepping stone to something that is useful. So the sort of race is on at the moment to be the first company or government or whichever, or however you want to do it, to show that link between a useful a quantum computer doing something with a not useful problem, and then a quantum computer doing solving a problem that can't be done with a classical computer, which is also useful. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. How much of the conversation amongst the community is with regards to kind of like the ethical side of this and any potential dangers or risks of quantum computers being used for nefarious means? Yeah,
it's big, I think. I think we all are. We share your worries really about, this being not that democratic. Let's be honest. This is at some levels, this is a sort of an arms race happening, mostly between the US and China at the moment. So I think all of us are aware of that. I don't think, to be honest, the lucky thing for us is that all of the really good applications for these systems, rather than the bad ones, emerge first. So the first quantum computers to be out there, they won't be useful for the really scary stuff. They'll be a world away from that. They won't be useful for breaking encryption. They will be useful for machine learning and other types of problems, which sort of, more widely can be understood to be useful. But I think what several companies, including Orca, are starting to do is get together and discuss the ethical side of quantum computing.
And there are quantum-resistant encryption methods, aren't there?
Yeah.
Is that becoming a more widely used thing?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it's widely used at the moment. It's been researched. So there's a NIST, which is an NSA, so various different US security agencies are sort of publishing recommendations for these new algorithms, new encryption algorithms. I think it's still sort of hotly debated. So, for example, this sort of recent publication by one US government department, it didn't just give one solution, it gave 5 solutions, and what are called post-quantum algorithms. So encryption algorithms that will survive beyond quantum computing.
Right.
So it's sort of, and I think in terms of people who are worried about security, they're not quite sure which solution to pick at the moment because everyone's sort of taking a look at how secure are these different alternatives. There's sometimes these algorithms that replace what's already there are a bit slower. So, maybe particularly in the case of, what might be relevant for Bitcoin, obviously the speed in which you can encrypt your data and decrypt your data matters a lot.
Yeah.
And if someone could say to you, okay, this data is much more secure because it's a better encryption algorithm, but it's going to take you 10 times, 100 times longer to encrypt, decrypt. Obviously, for a lot of customers, a lot of people using encryption, that's not very good.
Yeah.
So there's this whole debate happening about what the right new sort of platform, what the right algorithm needs to be.
Yeah. That's the biggest risk to Bitcoin is that I guess one of the risks with quantum computing and the risk to Bitcoin is that you talk about these milestones being hit, quantum supremacy. But I would have no doubt there are certain governments, if they achieve certain milestones in their quantum development, they're not going to actually make that public.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is a benefit to being able to use it for access to information, hacking, yada, yada. And so at the point where maybe SHA-256 can be broken, it might already have happened.
Yeah. I mean, no one knows. You're right. There's a lot of, I mean, China investing a huge amount of money into this space.
Of course.
Yeah.
As ever.
They see it as, I mean, they've got a strategy about building AI and also quantum alongside that. It's two things. Yeah, it's not possible to know when they'll have a system, or any of us will have a system that works and can do this type of thing. It's also not possible, in my view, to really know when a breakthrough might happen. So, really, any of us could, any company, Orca is looking at a few things that could very rapidly accelerate the number of qubits that we've got. So maybe not quite overnight, but pretty relatively quickly, all of a sudden you could have this new capability that no one has planned for before. That's something that, that's for good, and it's also for maybe not so good. That's why a lot of companies are like investing and looking at this now, because they want to prepare for the point where, out of the blue, one of these systems that can be used for something suddenly emerges. That's the sort of really interesting side of things. I will say as well, not so much on the SHA side, on the hashing side, but in terms of sort of encrypted data, what you've got to worry about, and again, this doesn't really relate to Bitcoin where everything sort of turns over every 10 minutes, but for normal encrypted data, some of that data might be being recorded today in an encrypted form, so that at a later date, when a quantum computer or some other system becomes available, that person can then look back at that data, which was encrypted, but now you've got a way of decrypting that data. And all of a sudden, an email that you sent 10 years ago, or, an encrypted file that you sent 10 years ago, which has been recorded by someone out there, all of a sudden they've gone back to it and applied a quantum computer and decrypted that. So a lot of the argument on the encryption side, not necessarily, this actually doesn't relate to sort of vulnerability for Bitcoin so much, but on the encryption side, a lot of people are worried about, how long do you want your secrets to remain secret for? And if you're really worried about things staying secret for a long time, there are some things that people won't want to get out for the next 100 years, then that's the reason for people moving on to other types of secure platforms today.
Yeah, I mean, you talking about things like messaging platforms as well, Signal, yada yada. I mean, maybe we just need to go to that Black Mirror world where everything is public.
Let's hope not.
What are you hiding, Danny?
Everything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to paint too scary a picture. I mean, it's sort of cool.
It's exciting and scary.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I don't want to dismiss it too much. That's sort of true with any disruptive new technology.
Of course.
And I will say, the thing that we are most excited about, the thing that I think has the most benefit to society, is the most democratic, is all of the stuff that will happen in the near term. I think, the ethical side of things is really important. And, I'm not dismissing it, but we're sort of forming, views, and we'll get onto that. But in terms of all of this decryption worry, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, because even with a breakthrough, it takes a lot of engineering to go from 100 qubits to 1 billion.
And is this something that, if it is possible, it won't still even be within a decade? We're talking many decades?
It depends who you talk to. I mean, I believe that breakthroughs are happening and will continue to happen, and to make it a reality sooner than a decade.
Okay.
But then, what do I mean by that? I don't necessarily mean...
Well, for the people listening, if there is a risk to their Bitcoin, they want to know how long. Is it a decade, 5 decades, that kind of thing? So
I think for the types of things we've talked about for Bitcoin, I do think you're talking about a 10-year or longer risk.
Okay.
I honestly can't see a quantum computer emerging that can... So the secret is something that can run error correction. That's what you need to support 1 billion qubits, and therefore, break SAR or encryption. I can't see that happening within the next 10 years. But you never know. Particularly sort of risk-averse people might, I don't know, if you've got a massive Bitcoin wallet and you're really worried about that, maybe you want to take steps. I don't know. But I wouldn't worry. Yeah. At least not now for Bitcoin.